Hi, I'm Rich Baker from Rollin' and Riches, and this is Improv Breakdown.
Turn on the microphone.
You asked for it.
Me?
What?
You're doing great.
This is gorgeous.
Yes!
Get in the lab.
Welcome to the Improv Breakdown. My name is Rich. This is my second solo episode where I'll be answering some of your questions, talking about some topics myself. Also, this is going to be the last episode of Season 1 of Improv Breakdown. I'm going to take a little break from the breakdown, and while I'm doing that, one thing I'm going to be doing is making sure that all the old episodes get uploaded as podcasts. So I've been slow on the technical learning on that, and that's one thing that if you're watching this on YouTube, that's awesome. But hopefully that soon all of the episodes will be up in podcast form and all the usual places where you look for podcasts, Spotify, Apple, etc. So that'll be coming out next. First question's a bit of a doozy from my friend Mark, and he asks, why doesn't improv pay? All right, so I could talk about this for a long time because I'm actually someone who has made a living primarily and exclusively off performing at different parts of my life. So improv does pay, it just doesn't pay as often or as much as other art forms that we think of. We think stand-ups, they get paid to perform, or, maybe certain sketch groups, this, that, and the other. But improv is actually not that dissimilar in that, a very few amount of people get paid to do it, and most people who do it don't. The difference with improv is that sometimes you will have, a show that's really good, that's professional, where the people are still doing it as volunteers. And there are probably people smarter than me that could speak to certain particular pieces of economics as to why, but I'll say in general, one of the reasons why it doesn't pay is because we allow it to, right? If you're willing to do improv and not get paid, then you are contributing to this, to the status quo that improvisers don't get paid. And I'm someone who does free improv fairly regularly, especially over the pandemic. I haven't charged for Zoom shows except a handful of times, and they were private gigs where I was hired to put on a show for a particular audience. So that's one thing about improv is that, stand-ups will get paid to go in front of an audience where they're not necessarily coming to see them, they might just be coming to the club to see stand-up, and the stand-ups who do the stand-up might still get paid for that. Whereas there's not a lot of that I've experienced in improv, where people come to, I'm just going to go see some improv, and the teams are getting paid. Usually the teams that get paid in improv are because people are going to see that show. So TJ and Dave, famous show, if you've never heard of them, out of Chicago, have been around forever. And, I don't believe they ever did free work, at least not in the time that I knew them, and I was interning at that show around 2005. Improv Shakespeare, I know how to deal, I believe, with a theater where they were getting paid for their performance, their in-house shows. And they were also, any troupe that I know of is willing to go on the road or get contracted out. So there's a lot of us, I've done a ton of corporate comedy where a corporation will hire us, or even private gigs where someone who's like, it's 50th anniversary, it's a big birthday, whatever, I'm going to hire an improv troupe to come, just in the same way that you'd hire a band or something like that. So there are plenty of incidents where improvisers get paid. I've probably been paid to improvise in some of the most random situations. When I was on the cruise ships, that was all I did, was improv and sketch, and then I get paid just to do that. But speaking to the bigger point of the question is, why do so many improvisers do it for free? Is because a lot of improvisers really aren't in it necessarily to be a big comedian. They're in it because they enjoy doing it. Cool thing that happens of I get to enjoy this thing, and some people like paying for it, so I'm going to do this fun thing and do it for an audience. Whereas other people get into improv for the audiences, right? And that's why I got into improv, because I wanted to be a performing comedian. Whereas I like doing it with my friends, and I love class and rehearsal and all that stuff. The main driving force for me to be an improviser was this idea of I would like to kill it in front of an audience. And there's plenty of improvisers who are that way. When we come out of the pandemic and theaters are looking very different, and there's maybe some theaters have gone away, new theaters are going to pop up. I don't know what's going to happen, but I would just say that if you are an improviser and you would like to get paid to do it, you're allowed to say no. If someone says, hey, I want your troupe to come do this thing, or I'd like you to be a part of this troupe. And they say, but we can't pay. If you say yes, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to improvise for free, I said I've done it many times. I will do it many times more. I do it for money too, but there's a balancing act there. But if you're agreeing to do it for free, then you're saying I'm okay with this, right? And that, again, that's fine. But just know that we are kind of our own worst enemy as far as that's concerned. And a lot of artists are, actors, musicians. We just love doing our art, so we do it for free. My hero, Seth Godin, talks about how you should give away some stuff for free, and then you should charge a lot for the stuff you charge for. So, for example, when I do a show with Roland, and it's just at a festival or whatever, or we're just doing something online, free, totally free. But when Roland and I get hired to do a corporate gig, we charge. You don't get us for cheap. And we've played some fairly big venues, some really nice places, and it's awesome. It is awesome to get paid to play improv, but you have to do it at a level to where when you can't bomb the show, because you bomb too many shows no matter what kind of comedy you do, and no one wants to hire you anymore because they're like, oh, we hired that person, they're not that funny, we hired that troupe, it just wasn't that good, right? So if you're gonna do it for money, you're betting on yourself. Comedy sports, we charged. They still do charge. I'm not anymore, but like Comedy Sports charges, and I can at least say for Chicago, people got their money's worth. Those shows were hilarious. We were professionals. We brought it, and we could guarantee that. We didn't have a bad show. We might have a bad moment or two in the show. Some shows, of course, are better than others, but there was a bar. And Mission Improbable was the same way. If you're hiring Mission Improbable to come on the road, very, very rarely. There were some times where we had some problematic people or, whatever, this, that, and the other in the troupe. But for the most part, you get a Mission Improbable show, you're crushing it. You get a comedy sports show, they're crushing it. Improv Shakespeare, they bring it. Baby Wants Candy, the musical improv show, they bring it, right? So if you're the kind of show that can bring it every time, charge for it. Charge for it, charge for it, charge for it. And if you can't, then, do those free shows and build up your skills to the point where you can consistently crush. Then you start charging for it. Thanks for the question, Mark. Okay, from Susie. She says, here's a question. Why is it usually frowned upon to ask questions in a scene when it's not an issue in everyday conversation? I love this topic. I've talked about it before. I believe I talked about an improv nerd as well. So improv is theater. And theater has parts of it that resemble real life. But if your measuring stick is my theater needs to look like real life, I would say you're probably doing boring theater. Theater needs to be a heightened version of things we can relate to, emotions, reactions, responses, big characters, big stories that mean something, have stakes, make you laugh, right? Most of life is boring. Most of life for most people is you wouldn't want to film it, right? There's moments of life that are interesting, and theater and film and art takes those moments and then they theatricalize them, right? So I wouldn't use that as your measuring stick right out of the gate. That's the first thing. Second, the reason why, and it's frowned upon to ask questions, so that's an interesting way of wording it, and if people are frowning at you for using questions, I would say they can chill out, right? What I say is questions tend to put more on your partner than on you, right? So if I ask you in a scene together, I'm like, you want to go to the baseball game, right? Now you can say yes or no, and now you have to make that choice. And yes or no is probably not that big a deal, but any question requires you to come up with an answer, right? Whereas if I just go, I'm super excited about the baseball game later, you don't have a choice at that point. Now I've given you the gift of we're going to the baseball game, and now you get to respond to that, right? Can you handle it? If I ask you, do you want to go to the baseball game? Probably, of course. It just, to me, it lowers the odds of success a little bit, and especially, yes, no questions might be a little bit easier, but then you've got questions like, what is your favorite color? All right, now I've got to pick one of, however many colors I have in my head, and why is it right or why is it wrong? It's I don't want to give that job to my scene partner. I would rather give them the gift of being well, since your favorite color is blue, I got you this shirt, right? Now that's a gift, literally a gift, but also a gift of I'm giving them information about their character. So ask questions all day if you want, and again, depending on who you're improvising with, maybe it's not a low percentage choice. Roland and I will ask each other questions all the time, but we like that insta-writing moment of having to come up with it. To us, that's more of a challenge, and it's fun. And if that's fun for you, do it. But I would say most of the people that I deal with have only been improvising 1 to 5 years, and they're playing with people who've only been improvising 1 to 5 years. So I would say, why not give that gift to your partner rather than ask them for something? Thanks for the question, Susie. How do you shake it off after a frustrating performance or workshop? This is a great question, and I recently read, I believe Jay Suko was quoting Craig Euler. I hope I got that right because I'm going off memory here, but he said, hey, however long the show was, that's how long you're allowed to be upset. So if it was a half-hour show, you can beat yourself up for half hour, and then you gotta, like, you're done, right? Obviously, some shows may have more stakes to them, like if it's like an audition scenario, there's producers in the audience, this, that, and the other, but I would say shaking it off is definitely something that I would advise. So how do you do it? It is so much easier to shake it off after your 12,000th show than it is after your second show, right? And it's a scale. It gets easier as you go because the more improv shows you do, the more you forget, the more you realize, oh, that was an important moment and it was fun, but it's not necessarily all that pivotal, right? It's more about at-bats, right? So Wayne Gretzky says you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and that's like, just keep shooting on goal, and you're gonna miss sometimes, right? And I would say when you start out, you're probably going to miss more often than not, and that's a skill. That's the skill is failing and loving to fail. So I say two things. One, dare yourself to fail. Run into the show going, I dare myself to fail right now. And then two, when it's over, celebrate the fact that you're failing. And I mean, I literally mean that. And it has taken me a long time. I'm still struggle with this, but when I don't do something I want to do or do something I don't want to do, I think, failed, and I gotta go celebrate. I love failing. Failing's my favorite thing, right? So I start to mentally associate failure with joy, with celebration. And the more I do that, the easier it becomes for me to fail. With improv, again, I don't want to tell someone who's only been doing it a couple of years how easy it is to shake it off, because it wasn't that easy my first couple of years. It is easy now, 22 years in, but that's a whole different thing, right? So I could say, well, the way you shake it off is do it for 2 more decades, and then you'll get there. I'm like, how about you get there right now? And knowing that, whereas I don't want to say the show's unimportant, but it's not as important as we tend to think it is. The audience who comes to our shows, if they enjoy it, they'll talk about it. If they don't enjoy it, they won't. And that's really it. That's the big consequences. So, what did I learn from that show that I can apply to next time? Using failure as a learning experience, right? To help yourself get better. And if you can watch the shows, I dare you, and this is not an easy thing to do, but I dare you to watch your bad shows. Tape your shows, and then when you got a bad one, watch that one. Not to beat yourself up. If you find yourself beating yourself up, don't watch it, because it's not worth the mental anguish that you would go through. But if you can watch it neutrally, as if you're watching someone else and just giving someone else notes on their performance, and go, oh, okay, I did this. Oh, that's a pattern I see with me. I shouldn't, okay. And then if you can really learn from it, people, like athletes learn from game film, that's awesome. When is it time to call out a fellow improviser for using triggering, inappropriate language in scenes, and how best to do it? Ooh, another doozy of a question here. So the best time to do it is in class or rehearsal when there's not an audience involved. And I would say, depending on the situation, if you can deal with it, where you're not embarrassing them or hurting them, let me back up. If you think it's intentional, if you think that they said whatever they said to try and get a rise out of people, to try and be offensive, deal with it right then and there. Because they're being toxic, and maybe that's not their normal MO, but that's not okay. They need to apologize. They need to make amends. They need to, if they're going to continue to be like that, they need to get out of the room. Maybe not do this rehearsal. Come back to another one until you've realized, hey, that's not okay, and I can't do that to my teammates. If it's an accident, right? If someone, and this happens to me all the time as a teacher, someone will say something, and I'm like, I guarantee you they are not trying to be offensive. They just didn't realize that what they said kind of made the room go, right? So I will gently use that as a teaching moment. You're like, so here's what happened there. And in those situations, people might feel like this. They might misconstrue you as believing that this is not okay, things like that. That's easier it's not easy, but it's easier for me in the teacher's position or the coach's position or the director's position, because I have the authority to kind of give notes. if you are rehearsing without a coach, well, first of all, I wouldn't recommend it. And I'm not just saying that because I am a coach, but because it can be easily problematic. In an improv scenario, you're supposed to be equal with everyone you're performing with. And when you start giving each other notes, it can make that dynamic kind of tricky. And maybe you and your troupe are like super mature, cool people, and you can give each other notes and it doesn't affect you. That is possible. I have never seen it. Not once. So if that's you, reach out to me because I would love to know your troupe dynamics and how you make that work because that's amazing. But I've never seen it. So if you are in that situation where, we don't have a coach to call this out, then I would say, if depending on the severity of what happens, either you need to call it out right there and be as very gentle as possible. I tend to look at it objectively, right? So let's say someone says something misogynistic. I would say, okay, hang on, hey, guy, the thing you just said, I don't know if you realize it, but it felt like it was misogynistic, and I don't want audiences or other players to believe that you're misogynistic when you're clearly not, because you said something that might make them believe that, right? So I just wanted to let you know what you said could be triggering to other people. Things like that, right? And it's totally okay to have a discussion on it if everyone's up for it, because then that's a great learning moment for everybody, because maybe someone else in the room didn't know that would have been misogynist, and now they're learning from someone else. And then you go, hey, it's no big deal. We just need to all learn together. And as your teammate, I'm going to try and help you learn. And if I do anything, I'd love for you to help me learn as well. Last thing I'll say on this is if you have a coach, director, teacher, whatever, they should be the one handling it. And if they're not handling it, you need to prod them, maybe after class, and be like, hey, that felt pretty misogynistic to me. Why didn't you call it out? Because I think as teachers and directors and coaches, we should be held to a higher standard, and we should not let that stuff go. And the reason why it got so toxic in improv partly is due to the fact that there were a lot of nice teachers that didn't know how to handle conflict or use those as teaching moments, and they let those go, and it festered, and it got worse, and it got worse. So it's very important that we deal with this. Now, the last way, I know I'm saying a lot on this, but it's a pretty important question, is if it happens in a show, that can be real tricky. But what I love to do is, as the character, comment on it in a way that tries to make the joke out of it, right? Oh, you're playing the misogynist character, right? Something like that. And I'll break the fourth wall. I don't care. I'll do anything, right? I might be like, okay, time out, everyone. Hey, troupe, I know that, I get that we're trying to make this character look like the bad guy by saying misogynist stuff. I'm just not sure if the audience is getting it, right? Now, I've pulled a move like that before. I've seen others do it before. And, it's getting creative, right? If it's not called out at all, maybe, depending on what it is, it'll be okay. But I would say for most audiences, for most shows, you're gonna want to call that out. Great question. If you were king, how would you organize your improv club organization for longevity, sustainability? What business models have you seen work well, not so well? Another great question. What I'll say is the business model that I don't think works well is stagnation. Improv is all about adaptation, and yet we treat the organizations around improv with stagnation. Same artistic director for 20 years, same, house teams that no one leaves forever. And it's like, I've been in Mission Improbable since 2009. I don't want to leave. And I think Mission Improbable is decent at this, but we need new blood. And with no one leaving, we don't have a lot of new blood. That happens to a lot of theaters and particular troupes. Now, Roland and Riches isn't going to hire new people because we're like a band. We weren't formed by an entity casting us. We came together and formed ourselves. And I think if you're a troupe like that, absolutely. Stay together, grow together as a group. But as theaters, when we're putting together house teams, if that same house team's been there for 6 years, I get that they're probably good, but why not let them go and go, okay, you guys are good. You don't need us anymore. You don't need us. You didn't need us. We don't need to put you together anymore. You're already together. We don't need you. You're good. So go get stage time elsewhere. But we get lazy about it. And we're like, oh, we get a show once every couple of weeks because we're a house team. And then we can just improvise and chill. And it's like, you're either growing or you're shrinking. You're either growing or you're shrinking, right? And so I don't want your skills to shrink. I don't want the camaraderie to shrink. I don't want the, diversity, all the things that are important to this art form. They shrink when we have stagnation. So I couldn't tell you exactly how to put together a theater. I have never applied to be an artistic director. I don't want to own a theater. So I haven't put a lot of thought into it. What I will say in general is there needs to be flow. There needs to be energy moving through. I would probably say, hey, you got to have a year contract or 2-year contracts or something like that. We're putting this house together team for 2 years. If you want to stay together after that, great, go be an independent team. But you will no longer be a house team at that point. Something to that effect. If you go back to if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell yourself about your improv career? I wouldn't tell myself anything because I wouldn't want to influence myself to do anything different than I did. The only thing I would tell myself is, hey, it's going to be okay. If a 20-year-old now was asking me about improv, I'd have a whole lot to say. I'd be like, well, are you doing it for the love? Because if you are, don't worry about money. I worried about money for long. I was like, I got to make a living off this or else I'm not a real improviser. I was like, no, you're fine. Money doesn't define if you're good at improv or not, right? Now, if you want to make a living at it, that's totally cool. But you can still be good at improv without justifying it by getting a paycheck. I would also tell 20-year-olds, don't put all your faith in someone else to do the work. You're an artist. You're a career. If you want to be an improv troupe, put it together yourself, right? If you want to audition for a house team, that's fine. But why are you auditioning for that house team? Is because you want them to do the work for you? Because that's the lazy way, and it's probably not going to get you what you want, right? What is it that you're an artist. What do you want to make? What kind of shows do you want to do? What kind of improv do you want to do? Maybe the improv you do doesn't exist anywhere else, and you need to invent a new thing. Great, go do that. Maybe you want to do improv Shakespeare. Great. Then don't worry too much about short form because go do improv Shakespeare. Do what you want to do. Maybe you want to do all of it like I did. Then do all of it. But don't expect yourself to get super far in any one of them right out of the gate because you're spreading yourself all over the place. So I would just tell the 20-year-old me that everything's going to be okay. And I would tell other 20-year-olds, you be the artist. Take responsibility for your own career. And don't let other people make decisions for you. What still surprises you about improv students? About the art form itself? As I get older, this thing changes, but what surprises me about the art form itself is its resiliency. We got very toxic as an improv community, not all of us, but just enough of us to where it permeated the whole thing. And we're bouncing back from that. We're calling those people out and saying, you're not allowed to coach anymore. We're not okay with you teaching. We don't want you to own a theater, right? And if you do, we're not coming to it. We're going to let everyone know that it's not okay, right? Because improv is about building each other up, supporting each other, making each other look good, and that kind of shit just doesn't fly anymore. And I love that improv is progressing in that way. What surprises me about improv students? You know what shocks me about improv students the most? Is that people want to do this form at all. Because when I discovered improv, it was so niche, and I felt like such a weirdo. You do improv? Might as well have said you were a Scientologist as far as, people knowing exactly what that meant and how many of us were practicing it. They're very different, by the way. But is that people love it, and that they keep discovering it, and they go, oh, I can't make a lot of money off this most likely, but I love this, I'm going to do it. And what pleasantly surprises me about improv students is that they love it, and that I love teaching them, and they love doing it, and it's just this, we're in this room together enjoying life together, and it's awesome. For would-be teachers, what idea or talent should I focus on to get to teaching ASAP? So I think what this question is asking, if you want to be a teacher, what should you focus on doing? I can't tell you individually because it's going to depend on who you are. But I would say leadership is the thing I see most people lacking. Sometimes I'll see people who are like leaders in other worlds, like the business world or social work or that lead people already. And so when they transition to being improv teachers from improv performers, they already have those leadership skills, which is awesome. A lot of improv teachers that I know, and I was definitely one of them, we need to be better leaders. We need to know how to handle conflict. We need to know how to make choices. and live with them, be okay with knowing that we're going to make mistakes sometimes, know how to apologize for those mistakes, know how to evolve. Being a leader is just as important as being a good and knowledgeable improviser, in my opinion, when it comes to teaching, coaching, or directing improv. What are your current favorite improv team troupe duos? Duos particularly. I'm obviously going to shout out my own because I'm a narcissist. Roland and Riches I think we do pretty good. I like us. And I'll be honest, if I've seen a ton of duos, I don't remember them offhand. I don't remember their names, but Chris George and Bill Arnett do a duo out of Chicago, and they're a lot of fun. Obviously, TJ and Dave, I've talked about them many times. If you haven't seen them, there's a documentary you can see called Trust Us. This is all made up, and it's fantastic. They're great. Weird Ass is a great one. Stephanie Weir and Bob Dassey. They're an awesome duo. I know there's about a zillion more improv duos in my head that I'm just not thinking of at the moment that I've seen. So I got to think on that. But thanks for the question. Thank you so much for watching Improv Breakdown. I love doing this show. It's a lot more work than I thought, and I'm happy to do the work, but I need a little bit of a break to play catch up. As I mentioned earlier, I still haven't really released the show as a podcast yet. You can get some of the episodes on Spotify, but I still need to do some other things. So as I'm taking a break between Season 1 and Season 2, and I'm guessing I'm going to be back around June with some great teachers and performers. There's so many people I haven't even come close to interviewing yet that are just fan-freaking-tastic. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much for watching the Improv Breakdown. If you have any questions, I'll be doing more solo episodes in Season 2. Please put them in the comments below. And in the meantime, keep making each other look good.